Good morning, afternoon, or evening, LAPCS scholars. Mr. Rowley here, and welcoming you to America's Reconstruction. So, the Civil War is over. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Now what? So now the South was completely destroyed, and now we need to get them back into the Union. So how are we going to go about that? So that's what this assignment is about. Reconstruction and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So we're going to be talking about the amendments, the laws that were passed to make sure that things get put into place. So make sure you are opening your exit ticket and looking at what you are required to do for that. And please make sure you are doing your Cornell or outline notes, whichever ones you choose to do. Okay, here we go. Reconstruction and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. After the war, when would the Southern states be allowed back to the Union? Under what conditions? What happens to the newly freed African Americans? Reconstruction means rebuilding something after it has been destroyed, and this war definitely destroyed a whole lot of the South. The condition of the South this time period was 2/3 of its transportation system was not operational. Large areas of land were destroyed. Remember, Sherman's march to the sea. He burned everything down, killed all the animals that he could get a hold of. And so a lot of places were destroyed. Chaos in the agricultural system, the farming, what to do with emancipation of the slaves when the slaves were freed. How do they replace them? How do the farmers replace them? So if you look at this little picture here, you can see it's a pretty stark illustration of what people were dealing with. Plans for Reconstruction. Well, President Lincoln wanted reasonable policy to reunite the South with the Union instead of punishing the South for treason. So that's an important thing because President Lincoln wanted to welcome the South back in. Radical Republicans did not want to be so nice to the South. Radical means people that are very extreme in nature. Led by Pennsylvania Representative Thaddeus Stevens. Remember Thaddeus Stevens School that's down the street from LAPCS? And Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner wanted to revolutionize Southern institutions, habits, and manners. Revolution in this context means to change, a drastic shift. Okay, so they wanted to drastically change the Southern institutions, habits, and manners. In other words, the Southern culture. So 3 goals. 1, to prevent the Confederate leaders from returning to power. 2, to strengthen the Republican Party in the South. Remember, the South was very much Democrat. The federal government, number 3, the federal government should help African Americans achieve political equality, which means the right to vote in the South. It would help Republicans control Congress. South would gain seats in Congress through the 3/5 compromise. Remember the 3/5 compromise, when African Americans or slaves were only counted as 3/5 of a human being for population purposes. This is a quote from Senator Henry Wilson of Massachusetts on December 21st, 1865. Congress must see to it that the man made free by the Constitution is a free man indeed, that he can go where he pleases, work when and for whom he pleases, go into schools and educate himself and his children, that the rights and guarantees of the good old common law are his, and that he walks the earth proud in the conscious dignity of a free man. The Wade-Davis Bill required majority of the adult white males in the former Confederate state to take an oath of allegiance to the Union. The state could then hold constitutional conventions to create a new state government. States' conventions must abolish slavery and deprive or not allow former Confederate government officials or military officers the right to vote or hold office. President Lincoln had pocket vetoed the bill. He just didn't sign the bill. It just stayed on his desk. He didn't want to be too harsh to the South because he didn't feel like that would be productive. He felt like if we are too hard on the South, then it's going to make it much more difficult to bring the Union back together. But remember, President Lincoln is dead at this point. So that meant that radical Republicans were able to sort of influence the power. The Freedmen's Bureau. The Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. Hundreds of thousands of people in the South were unemployed, homeless, and hungry. To give food and clothing to war refugees in the South using extra army supplies, they allowed 30,000 rations a day for a year to help prevent mass starvation, which was a very, very big problem. Worked with Northern charities to educate former slaves. Because remember, slaves, by and large, could not read or write because it was against the law. Provided buildings for schools, paid teachers, and helped set up colleges to train African-American teachers. The Black Codes. Now, this is a really important thing to be paying attention to, okay? Lincoln's assassination led to his VP, Vice President Andrew Johnson, becoming president. Now, remember why Johnson was chosen as his running mate. It was because he was a Southerner and sympathized with the South, and Lincoln thought, politically speaking, it would make it so that he would get some support in the South. But now Johnson is president, and he began pardoning the Southerners, allowing them to elect Confederate officers and political leaders into office. The Black Codes were passed by those same Southern state legislators to limit African-American rights. So one of them was required to enter into annual labor contracts. So they were forced to say, I will work for you for an entire year. Children had to accept apprenticeships and could be whipped or beaten. They had very specific work hours, and they had to get licenses to do anything that was a non-agricultural or non-farming job. So if you look at this, this is only a short list of what the Black Codes were, but if you look at this list, really, does it look that much different from slavery? Okay, the 13th Amendment. Congress, February 1st, 1865, Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted of a crime, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Section 2, Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Civil Rights Act of 1866, Congress's effort to override the Black Codes in the South, granted citizenship to all persons born in the United States except Native Americans. We will be talking more about Native Americans soon, because a lot of policies for Native Americans happened after the Civil War. African Americans could own property and were to be treated equally in court, gave federal government the power to sue people who violated these rights. Keep in mind, these are all things that are going against each other. Don't forget, there's a lot of push and pull going on here. The 14th Amendment, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States of the state wherein they reside. In other words, if you were born in this country, you were a citizen of this country, whether you are Black or white or any other part of the rainbow, okay? If you were born here, you are a citizen or have gone through the naturalization process if you're an immigrant. Military Reconstruction Act. This divided the former Confederacy into 5 military districts with a Union general in charge of each one. So this was martial law, essentially. Former Confederate states had to hold another constitutional convention to give the right to vote to all adult male citizens, including African Americans, and ratify the 14th Amendment, Many officers supervised voter registrations. The end of 1868, 6 former Confederate states met the requirements to be admitted back into the Union. 15th Amendment, February 27th, 1869. And for the record, Mr. Riley's birthday was February 27th, just so you know. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by Senate on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So the 15th Amendment essentially provided the right to vote for all men, regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Still does not include women. That will be a little later on. The Ku Klux Klan was started in 1866 by former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee. Grew very rapidly in the South. Their goals were to drive out Northerners who moved to the South. They were known as carpetbaggers, to get involved in politics. And they wanted to intimidate African American voters. That was the primary goal of the Ku Klux Klan, which was to keep African Americans from being able to vote. Broke up Republican meetings, drove Freedmen's Bureau officials out of their communities, burned African American schools, homes, churches, and tried to keep African Americans and white Republicans from voting in the South. The Ku Klux Klan Act outlawed activities of the Klan because, well, what were they doing? They were harassing people, they were hurting people, they were destroying communities, they were killing people. It was, they were a terrorist group. And the end of Reconstruction. So Ulysses S. Grant, the great general hero of the Union, became president in the election of 1868. The Panic of 1873, the powerful banking firms declared bankruptcy, smaller banks closed, stock market plummeted, businesses closed, and unemployment soared. Economics, this is just normal economics. This kind of stuff happens. It's comes and goes in a cycle. The federal troops were pulled out of the South, so no more military martial law. The New South was powerful white Southerners and Northern financiers, great economic changes to part of the South. Northern resources helped rebuild the railroads and build a lot more railroads. Southern industry grew with iron and steel industry developing. Tobacco processing became a big business and cotton mills appeared. Tenant farmers, end of Reconstruction ended African Americans' hopes of being granted their own land in the South, so they paid rent for land that they farmed. Sharecroppers, they did not pay their rent in cash, but instead in crops. Sometimes it would be half to 2/3 of the crop. Okay, so that's basically Reconstruction in a nutshell. It went to about 1877, so 1865 to 1877. It did not change things for former slaves very much. It more or less gave the promise of being able to someday take part in American society, but we were still a long way to go. The black codes were, and that's something we're going to talk about a little bit more. The black codes were there to keep African Americans and former slaves down. So it was a slight step forward, but not nearly as what it would have been had Abraham Lincoln survived. Okay, so make sure you work on your exit ticket and get your either outline or Cornell notes sent to me. And I will see you later. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. All right. Have a good rest of your day.